Hello. Hello, Dust. Hello, Shal. Wow, Shal has glasses on.
Internet,
That's how professional he's
greetings.
really.
Hello to all of you. Welcome to our
How do you
corner of the
do?
internet.
Look at that. The true man. But today, we're talking about things that aren't always true. Reviews, or more specifically, review bombing. The recent release of Last of Us 2 has
2 out of
so...
10. Most
Yeah,
overrated hairline I've ever seen.
beautiful.
Whew.
Well,
Them's fighting words.
it's okay. I see that blonde fringe, and I don't need to say anything back to that curtain.
Rip.
But The Last of Us 2, it's been one of the oddest games in terms of reviews because there was the NDA stating that they couldn't mention certain parts of the game in the review, and then people on the flip side saw that as an invitation to review bomb. So we thought, why not talk about review bombing and the principles involved, this idea that it's always just done by trolls, which isn't necessarily true, and that's always projected by the games media, who have a little bit of a history with review bombing and how they portray it. So I thought we'd get started. If Charles or Dust would like to begin with their thoughts on what the concept of review bombing is, and if they see it as something that is a level of value, or as the title says, simply just noise.
Well, I mean, we should start with kind of defining it. I'm sure our viewers are familiar with the concept, but maybe we're reaching out to people who normally aren't gamers and have stumbled
Mm-hmm.
into our corner of the internet
Oh,
without
you put
any
it in there.
idea about what it is. Thank you to some excellent SEO. Yeah, review bombing. Yeah, it's basically the practice of it's a DDoS attack on a game's review score. I think that's the easiest way to define it, is a massive impounding of negative reviews. If it's on a number scale, zeros. If it's something like on Steam where you give a negative or positive review and it's binary, it's negative. And for one reason or another, it's just this dogpile to drag a game's review score down
Mm-hmm.
and make it look as negative as possible, usually in order to convince people who aren't part of the conversation or who are outlookers, who are on the fringes, to look at it and say, "Oh wow, this is a bad game. Maybe I shouldn't buy it."
But
Sometimes it's not always
yeah,
consumer driven, but
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
the main thing, as the title says, I didn't put the title there just for like clickbait. I do think that the idea of review bombing has kind of descended into various different parties. So you have obviously the organized group that will do it just to troll because they think it's a fun time, and
Right.
the problem is review bombing wouldn't be such a big deal if it wasn't for the fact the press routinely highlight it, which then emboldens the people because they realize that you're paying attention, and because the press are talking about it, the video game publishers and developers, and biz dev, them respective outlets, will look at that and they'll say, well, look, this is now a problem. And I think there's a level of nuance that usually goes unchecked when it comes to review bombing. And I want to bring up Metro Exodus as a prime example. So put yourself in a position where you're waiting for the game, a long time in release, and it's 2 weeks before release, and you've pre-ordered it on Steam, you're ready to play, you've been watching the diaries, the dev diaries, you're excited. And then you see a little email pop up, and suddenly that game you've been looking forward to, which has 2 weeks to release, is delayed for a year because of an Epic Game Store exclusive deal. And suddenly you're in a position where you're now waiting for a year because of this deal that was kind of plucked out of nowhere. It wasn't because the game was broken. It wasn't because they were polishing the game. The game's playable. It's ready to go. And there was even copies printed with the Steam stuff on. But you have to wait. So how do you respond? Of course,
but
you review
Rico, you
bomb.
don't understand. If you pre-ordered the game, you got it on Steam anyway. So
Yeah, you
everyone's
did.
being a baby and complaining. Tap the NES punk.
Well,
Oh, yeah, I remember that. That was one hot garbage take.
the fact is, to me,
And I pulled the trigger to get it on Steam, and
mhm.
man, not worth it.
Well, I
Being
got it on
pressured
Epic
like that
Game
sucked.
Store. I was forced into it because I wanted to play it because I was a massive Metro fan, and we can talk about the qualities of the game in another episode. But I didn't leave a review, I have to say, but I did feel that the whole review bombing thing. Obviously, it wasn't taking place on Steam because you couldn't leave a review. It was on Metacritic, and the review bombing thing, if you looked at it, was mostly people targeting the Epic Game Store release, and the press were covering this, saying that this was a disgrace. It was trolling. It shows how entitled gamers are. And look, we can make various different comments on how entitled people are, not just as gamers but consumers. As a consumer, you feel a sense of entitlement, especially in the long running series, which didn't do too well, but because the fans stuck with it and kind of did word of mouth, you almost feel like, Metro series is my bud, it's my thing. So when they turn around and it gets pulled from Steam 2 weeks before release because of a deal, you can tweet about it, sure, but the chances are you have a low following, right? And not many people are going to pay attention. You can make a YouTube video about it, unless you have a platform already. No one's going to see it. Or you can go Metacritic and have your voice heard, even if it's a rage, a little rant. People can still see it. And when more people see it, they'll join in. Because like, oh, this is a good point. I feel enraged about this. I want my voice heard. And then suddenly it's like a snowball effect. And then the press cover it. And then the press wonder, gee, I wonder why people review bomb. This is just trolls. And then that kind of enrages you even more. Because like, no, I feel aggrieved. And I think I have the right to. In this case, I believe they do. So when the press cover it, it then elevates. And the developers and the publishers can see it. And I think there was so many outlets that were, a lot of writers on Twitter that were questioning, why are people review bombing Metro Exodus? And it was such a simple, clear, and obvious reason. The fact is, reviews have been such a mainstay of video game media, and before the internet age, there was no way for the people to really communicate their thoughts on the game on a platform. We didn't have social media, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have all this. It was just video game magazines, and that was it. And you could have letters, of course.
And word of mouth. And of course,
word of mouth. But in terms of like a larger reach.
Bubble, right?
In terms of a larger reach.
You'd have a media group of friends, you talk about it, and that was that. And then when the internet opened up, and I remember the early days of going to like GameSpot and all that, you could go to the forums and talk about things in a very moderated setting, but you had to look for it. It wasn't there in your face, not in the same way that reviews and criticism and these sort of reactions are very apparent and very easy to find now. They used to be a little bit out of the way.
Yeah.
So with review bombing, it's just kind of, I don't want to sound so pretentious as to make this connection, but it's sort of kind of like its own online protest. And I'm being very pointed because I know the political climate. I'm not trying to make any connections to anything. I'm just saying it is in its own right a sort of protest in regards to a particular issue about a particular thing.
It's also kind of like supplementary to like boycotting something.
Except boycotts never work because you're always going to have people who don't care about the discussion and buy it anyway. It's still entertainment.
Right.
And I do want to bring this up. So, talking about specifically the Metro Exodus review bomb, it's ironic because the Epic Game Store, when it first launched, cited review bombing as one of the things that was bringing PC gaming down, because review bombing and other game the system is a real problem, which is why Steam is bad. And in 2018, Tim Sweeney said they're working on a review system for the Epic Game Store based on the Unreal Engine marketplace. Presumably, it's supposed to come after the shopping cart.
The fabled shopping cart.
Did your inside source tell you that one?
I'm looking at the PC Gamer article on the Metro Exodus review bomb, and it's right there. And the tweet is not deleted.
I thought you were joking about that. That's terrible.
No, I'm going to link it. No, I'm joking about it being implemented after the shopping cart.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I was like, was that your inside source there?
Yeah. I've got a direct line to Sweeney.
And then didn't they immediately post like bragging like data going, this is sold more than blah, blah, blah?
They did. And what they were doing was comparing it to Last Light, not the original Metro, not the original Metro 2, which didn't sell all that well, allegedly. But we don't actually have the numbers for it on any consoles or even PC, so we don't know how well it sold. But the big numbers were Last Light or Redux.
But we can boil down the idea that it was more frustration with Metro Exodus. But
and it was a way to kind of express that frustration and I think this is why I have mixed opinions on review bombing. I guess we're like 15 minutes into the show, so I might as well get this out of the way. I have mixed feelings about review bombing. I think that it has its place as a mechanism to show distaste or disdain with a particular aspect or a particular business practice or a particular outcome of a game, or even to say that it's not a good follow-up to something that you're very invested in. It has that sort of moment of vox populi. However, and also going on that note, I think it's especially important considering that a lot of the discussion around games is very pointed. You have games media, and that's a very large juggernaut. In that there's very little differentiation in terms of opinion.
Mhm.
I mean, and I'm not trying to paint everything with a big brush, but when you're looking at Kotaku, when you're looking at Polygon, when you're looking at PC Gamer, when you're looking at Destructoid, they're all very much the same across the board. Looking at one is like looking at any of the others. So, in one sense, review bombing is a way to sort of express ideas that aren't inherent to the games journalism. On the other hand, and this is the major problem that I have with it, is that it is far too easy to co-opt. And that for every time you do have a legitimate reason to be upset with game practice or business practice, and you want to review bomb it, like, and a good one, for instance, was Doom's de novo when
Mhm.
Doom the
The
Doom
anti-cheat
2019
system.
had a de novo 2020, yeah, the anti-cheat system, sorry, and it was review bombed, and then the company responded, say, hey, we're removing it in the next patch, we're sorry. Perfect. And that is an example of review bombing that kind of vox
I got
populi.
another one too.
Right way. Yeah, but
Rainbow
the
Six
downside,
Siege. Remember that?
I don't remember the Siege one. You're
So
gonna have to
okay,
I don't
I'll
I'm
fill
not
you
I
in
don't
real
pay much
quick.
attention to Siege.
Okay, so what happened was Ubisoft was complying more or less with Chinese regulations, and they started pulling out things like skulls that were on the wall, like painted skulls, the what do you
Gambling
call it? The slot
machines. Yeah.
machines,
Which was
yeah,
a problem.
the stripper looking stuff on the walls, etc. And people review bombed it, and in the end, Ubisoft decided that the Chinese client was going to be one way and the rest was going to remain untouched.
The
And then it was fine.
reasons for some of the removals, though, because obviously there's a lot of people that will just see as Chinese censorship, but there's also a meta reason for that as well. So when you're playing it's in the Oregon map, and the Oregon map has actually since been reworked, and I don't think they're in there anyway. But back then, the Oregon map had some slot machines in a certain position in a room. And if you're calling out the position of enemy, you could say, oh, he's next to that wall. Or you could say it next to the slots. So it had a rule. The environment had a rule. And you see this all the time, especially in multiplayer competitive games. People will call out the location based on the most recognizable thing. It's like Dust 2, double doors. You instantly know that there's 3 sets of double doors in that game, but you instantly know that double doors is the first one looking down towards T-spawn. And that was the reason why people were so kind of more aggrieved about the changes in Rainbow Six. And obviously it's a question for positive. But at the same time, I remember there was some people that were review bombing Siege because they removed ACOGs from a bunch of operators, and that was to stop people peeking. So if you know what peeking is, at the start of each round, there's the information gathering stage where attackers have the drones and they'll scout around. And then at the end of that, that's when the game starts. And a lot of defenders who had access to the ACOG would shoot out the windows and use the ACOG's capabilities. 'Cause it's got the highest zoom outside of a sniper rifle. Would use it to pick off people from a distance. And it was becoming an issue. So they removed it. So people, in return, try to do like a mini review bomb. And we can argue the semantics of that. Is it a negative? Is it a positive? And I think a lot of these games as a service struggle with the idea of review bombs because it's the only way that their players can really say something as a joint group.
Yeah.
So obviously we have subreddits, etc. But I gotta tell you, there's not a huge amount of companies out there that really pay a lot of attention to their communities outside of direct social media, so like your Facebook and Twitter. Rainbow Six Siege does though, so I'll give them credit for that.
Sure. And then so that's where I'm going with it. With that, those are the positive aspects of it. Is
Mhm.
that kind of organized movement to make something clear and have that open up that discussion, or at least show that there are issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
The negative part of it, and this is the one that's much more prevalent, I feel, because I think that this is the one that not only gets the media attention, but deservedly does, because this happens more often than the good stuff does. And I'll
Yeah.
be totally honest, is that review bombing for the sake of like a stupid reason, or for the sake of controversy. not necessarily trolling, because with trolling you don't have an aim, and coming from somebody who trolls in his daily life, left, right, and center, you do it for the lulz. You do it just to get a kick out of watching the other person get angry.
It's more
And
a
it is
chaos
hilarious.
with them than an
Yeah, it's
aimed
chaos,
goal.
right? Yeah,
Correct.
it is. That's exactly what trolling in day-to-day life is. But this isn't trolling. This is something like backlash to something. And I'm just gonna make an example of review bombing. I don't know. I can't think of an example right off the top of my head, but something like
Battlefield 5 was one, although it wasn't great.
Battlefield 5. Actually, you know what? That's a good one. Battlefield 5.
Battlefield 5, or what the critics
Battlefield 5.
called, and I'm going to use the term not so that we're raising controversy, but it was often nicknamed by the review brigaders as Genderfield 5, right?
Yeah,
And then they
yeah.
attacked it solely on certain aspects of the
Right.
game, even though that had nothing to do with the game's quality.
Right, and in this case, it was based on that flimsy idea of oh, it's not realistic. Why is there a woman on the cover? Well, I mean, yeah, you might have been expecting a realistic shooter, but not. Why are you looking for that in Battlefield?
Yeah, at this point, that ship has sailed.
Yeah, that was a microscope on one thing that was then used to justify sort of outrage towards it. And I'll admit, I thought it was, the entire review bombing and backlash against it was silly. I have my criticisms about Battlefield 1, whatever. But the entire mob that was stirred up against that was a little bit just a little bit silly. Not to say that the response to it was any better by the company, but
I think the biggest problem with the Battlefield 5 one is because of the nature of the review bombing. I think it's fair to say there was a fair contingent of people that were doing it through some place of sexism, because there's a woman on the front. This is stupid. They felt like it was an over virtue signal. But the problem with the review bombing is the game had issues, so the gameplay is pretty dull, to be honest. The class identity isn't really there. Battlefield has kind of became this weird mishmash of ideals from Call of Duty than anything that was previously Battlefield. And all the criticisms, the valid criticisms, then become washed under the wave because everyone is focusing on this one idea that's not even that much of a problem, like the fact that there's a woman with a weird hand on the cover, or there's a guy running around topless with
which I'll admit was very stupid. I hated that. It's the cybernetic hand thing. It's well, I mean, I just came from Battlefield 1 where you had automatic machine guns and
in World War One.
Warfare. So I don't care that much, but I thought it was kind of silly. It was a little too sci-fi for my taste. So you know what I did? I didn't buy the game.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a big Battlefield fan anyway. I just didn't buy it.
But the review bombing exercise, like I was saying, it just kind of hides the genuine criticisms. So you can't improve these games because if the criticisms that are genuine are hidden underneath a sea of bullshit and trolling, then they don't get touched upon, and the press don't really highlight it because I think it's fair to say now that all mainstream press...
It's less of a sexy headline. It's much easier.
It's a hot headline.
It's much easier to say, "Heh, gamers."
And then people react to that headline. I mean, this is an entirely different topic we've gone forever, but I think it's well known.
Movies too, right?
Yeah, with the Ghostbusters.
Star Wars films or Ghostbusters, where then they reduce all the criticisms to sexism, trolls,
And while there will be people doing that for them reasons, nostalgia. It's not the majority.
Right.
I remember James Rolfe.
Oh, there are people that do it.
Yeah, he said he's not reviewing it, not because of the controversy necessarily, but his justification was, I love this movie. It is one of my all-time favorites. It has really made me the kind of person that I am, and I cannot bear to, review something that's just so different from what I'm used to. And he recognized he would be biased going into it, so he's just not going to touch it. And then, of course, you got the backlash to it. I think it was Lindsay Ellis responded. It's I too am going to not think a movie is bad before watching it. It's did you watch the video? That's not what he said. And then now you're getting kind of the dog pile on the other side where you're turning into a pet cause.
Which this is what happens again with review bombing. I think most people tend to think it's a tactic played by one group of a certain persuasion, but the fact is it happens. It doesn't matter what you kind of subscribe to in beliefs in life. people are review bombing from all sorts of different positions or areas of the world. It just seems to be the idea that, because you can understand
Right.
that the idea of user scores was this idea that you, the common person who doesn't have a platform, you don't have a big YouTube account, you don't have a big Twitter following, you're just a normal person, and you can simply have your say and move on. And that was the idea with Steam. And obviously, when you give someone such a free platform, there will be people to abuse it. And that's,
Right.
And we
you
have
know,
seen
It
that.
goes both
We have
ways
seen
too.
yeah.
I'm
And
gonna read a review off, and I'm gonna have you tell me which game this is. Okay?
okay,
It says, "This game was amazing. I think people didn't get the idea. I like gameplay and graphic. I bought from PSN for $7, and for this price, I think it's worth worth every penny. They gave it a 10. This game's overall rating is a 1.9, but this person gave it a 10. Which game that you recently played,
Is it
Linko, could that
a
be?"
user score or
It is a
Metacritic
user
score?
score. There is a Metacritic score of someone giving
the
this an
suicide
80.
of Rachel Forrest. Rachel,
Here we go.
whatever her name is.
Nope.
Fuck.
And I'll read here. Here's a critic's review.
Oh, The Quiet Man.
22, yeah. And here's a critic that gave it an 80 when the next highest score from a critic is 45. He says, "It's not without its issues, but there are the kinds of experiences that really stick in the mind. And I'd rather that yet another stock standard action game that neatly fits within structures that we've already seen dozens of times before." What? So because there's repetitive AAA games out there, this piece of shit is okay? What?
Exactly.
What? It's like, dude, you do realize this wasn't an indie project, right? This was Square Enix that published
Right,
this
but,
shit.
but you don't understand. They did something different, so therefore it is on a scale. It is an A game. Like if this was school, they
It's a
just gave
solid
the
B.
Quiet Man a grade of an A.
Well, they gave it a B,
Put that
but
into
yeah.
perspective. No, an A. If it's an 80 out of 100, that's an A minus.
Wouldn't that be a 90?
No, 90. No, 90
I
is
think we're now
90.
discovering the problem with review scores in general.
90 is higher. 80 above is an A. So at 80, that's an A minus. 85 is an A. 90 plus is A plus. Or at least it is in Canada. I don't know about
Okay,
you.
not in the States. States, it would be A plus would be 100. 90 is an A minus. Anything above would probably be. B minus would be an 80. It varies too. And in others, it's
See, this is
80
why
to.
this is why review scores don't work, because they're used on a weird American system that make no sense to anybody else.
Speaking of which, did you know there are 12 inches in a foot? And it's
Oh. A
based
what?
off of the measurement of some king's foot at once upon a time.
A what?
Because our metrics, there are.
Hey, can you switch that into meters for me?
What
One.
centimeters? If you're in Poland, centimeters.
I will say
No,
this, full disclosure.
I'm in a podcast with
Full
two people who
disclosure
use
and
the
hot
imperial
take.
system. I'm the most progressive out of all of us when it comes to the mathematics.
What?
better.
No, it'd be you and Linko.
No, he's British. They use imperial. Where do you think imperial comes from?
Star Wars.
Not anymore. Britain Britain
Well, they still use
updated. Now it's
imperial. You guys still use imperial, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, of course.
Oh.
They use stone. They use stones to weigh things, not even
that's
pounds.
fair.
This
But
is
anyway, my hot
I don't know
take
what a
is I
stone
prefer the
weighs.
metric
I
system.
mean, I can
don't
take
know
a
why.
stone and put it on a scale, but I don't know what it weighs.
Anyway,
Change
review
is
bombing.
hard and pride. Yep.
Review
So just
bombing.
like how
Sorry.
we need to change the measurement system in the United States, we also need to change the way reviews are handled, perhaps. But we'll get to that.
Well,
What
I
I'll say
believe
is
it
you
wasn't
see
that
the
long
opposite.
ago that
People giving games 10 out of 10s that are trash, or they give good games 0 out of 10s because they're upset. And it's like neither of those are good. I get it. Some of these people are trolling and giving it a 10 out of 10. Some, I'm sure I'll find a trolly one that's just funny. And you see it on Steam too, like with the likes or not liking.
well,
But-
yeah, well, in respect
but
of
those
that,
aren't bombing so much as they are just isolated trolling.
the Steam review system, I like the way they do it now. So they have a time scale, so you can see a dip in. So, for example,
Mhm.
if it's very negative, you can see a big dip. Battlegrounds probably has the best example of this. So when content is bad or there's a bug in the game that fundamentally breaks it, there's a huge dip. Or in the case that the one time I put a negative review, which you could consider a review bomb in the good sense, is about 2 years ago, I think it was. I was permanently banned from the game for a VAC ban. And I was like, excuse me? And then I went on the Steam page, and everyone, there was a huge amount of people that had been permanently banned through VAC ban. So the rating just went, and it's pretty cool that you can look at Steam's grid and see dip, rise, consistency.
Yep.
And I feel like this is a great tool for companies that are running these games as a service or multiplayer games, because it's valuable information for their community teams and the development teams, where they can see, through people's reactions. So this idea of review bombing fundamentally being bad is something I've always struggled with, and I feel like the main people who push this as a bad thing are either people in the video game media who kind of prefer to have the media say it as the primary be-all and end-all, and also the publishers, because they like to control the image of their brand, as we saw with the likes of EA, which is another company which suffered review bombing for the correct reasons, with their microtransactions in Battlefront, and with FIFA and the other sports titles, but mainly Battlefront 2. So the general review bombing and also negative media played a role in that. And then they saw that, fixed it, and now if you go in it, you see the reviews are actually rising up. This isn't a case of, oh, I am entitled and I will review bomb it and that's it. Because a lot of the time people will return and rectify the review based on the actions of the developer, publisher, etc.
A lot of times it's not permanent. And one thing that I absolutely love about Steam is that you can see the snapshots. It was like you said, you know exactly what dates that those review bombs started to coalesce and why they're there, because you'll see the bombs. And on Steam especially, I think Steam is a bit of an exception. You're not going to get people change their reviews on Metacritic, but you will on Steam, because people are more dedicated to the platform. When you're using it daily, when you're using it, and when you are not hardcore, but when you put a lot of emphasis on using that platform, and it has a very strong presence in your gaming life, then you're going to feel your connection to modifying things that are attached to your account.
Yeah.
And so I think that pushes people to change their reviews once things are rectified. Metacritic, not so much. Metacritic, you just kind of leave it and forget about it.
Metacritic's basically like Rotten Tomatoes for video games at this point, right?
It really
the
is.
critics are out of touch, and the user scores aren't exactly that accurate either.
No, I mean, both of them are just
at least you can use it for an aggregate, but it usually gets tricky.
To a point. I mean, you can kind of get an idea of like a temperature of where people are, but it's just so hard to narrow down, right?
I find that Metacritic has too much influence in the industry, if I'm honest. You hear about these contracts where a game, if it hits a certain amount of Metacritic, will get
New Vegas
a bonus.
came just shy of that bonus.
For that. Yeah, New Vegas is infamous for that.
And the problem,
I think they were 1 point off. 1 or 2 points off.
The problem doesn't just revolve around the culture of it, because obviously people will see that as a strange thing, but I feel like it kind of shines an unfavorable light on the role of the relationship between publishers and the press. And this isn't me railing on the press, of course. I just find this relationship between the press and the publishers with these kind of deals in place, in contracts that exist like this, to be a very, very dangerous situation where, a level of morality comes on. If you're a reviewer and you know that if you give this game this weird score of, let's say, like 7 out of 10, and if you give that game, let's say, 1 more point, an 8 out of 10, that people will be better off paid, and they'll have a better quality of life because of your reactions and review. I feel like this puts a strange position of pressure on reviewers.
I don't think reviewers are in that position, because and I know that it's a bit of an incestuous business, because of you rub shoulders with the same people, and I get that, but reviews are still sort of done in isolation, in that you do your review, you post it, and it's kind of independent from what other people review, unless you're kind of talking about it behind the scenes. And then that's just collected on Metacritic.
I would agree with that, but I think there's certain cases, especially with Last of Us 2. So there's been a number of writers from different outlets. I'm not going to name names because that's not what we're about here. I don't want people to go and harass these people. That's wrong. I find it strange that there are reviews that come out from people who, because we live in an era now where a lot of these video game outlets have a level of personality about them. It's not just the information days, and this is like with every walk of life now. It's like entertainment nation. It's a combination of information and entertainment, but we're finding that the entertainment levels are kind of outweighing the info levels. And The Last of Us 2 has had been reviewed by a number of people who were already projecting an overwhelmingly positive picture of the game before the game's release. Now, to me, you can express some level of excitement, but I was seeing a lot of these video game people that are reviewing the game now and have reviewed the game to be actively defending every aspect of The Last of Us 2 before its release. Now, to me, I feel like that's a level of bias that you will find very hard to separate when it comes to sitting down and playing the game, because if you review the game and the review of the game isn't too great, the game's just okay, or even bad. I'm not saying Last of Us 2 is, of course. I don't have a dog in this race, so to speak. But I find that a lot of these people are so they're so embedded in their own following on Twitter that they will be aware, if I review this game and it's bad, and I've spent the past 3 or 4 months defending it and championing it, will it not look like I am putting egg on my own face, if you know what I mean? I feel like we're in a position where personality and people are writing stuff for their own following on Twitter rather than reviewing a game for the quality and the merits of the game itself. And this can be something that makes a bad game look better, or sometimes, and I have this inkling about certain games that came out, that they've been badly reviewed by people that didn't understand it or simply came in with a dislike of the... There's some reviews of Kingdom Come Deliverance, I will say, where people... I felt that people were influenced by the creator's comments and therefore they couldn't enjoy the game. And that's the kind of thing
a mixture between comments from developer and, for some of the reviewers, their own politics got into their review, and it's like, well,
yeah, I was gonna say that. And
but is the game good?
Trying to come off on the right side of the discourse, and this is sort of why we'll talk about games media on another episode, but
I have my reservations
with but I think this plays into the review bombing thing, because people will see that, and this might not be true, but I've always said, if you don't fill in the gaps with information, people will do it for you, and they can put in their own ideas. That's how conspiracy theories start, etc., and how they really ramp up. We saw it with the 5G thing and the coronavirus, where people were just filling in the blanks with their own ideas. And that's one of the reasons why review bombing is such a big thing. People will automatically assume that because The Last of Us 2 is getting very high reviews, they're like, oh, well, they're obviously just doing that because they're on this mind belief, and this is how they see things, and that doesn't mean the game's good, so I will counterbalance this with my negative review, and it becomes very, very dangerous. And this is where I feel like we're in this diverse of kind of friction, constantly in friction with games media and users, mainly because of social media. But the idea of review bombing is like how people...
social media.
Yeah.
Definitely because of social media. Absolutely it is, because then... what social media does is it kind of puts people in camps. And with games journalism, going back to my previous comment about how much of games media is the same, in terms of its opinions and presentations, and very few different takes on it outside of that little bubble, that is just an echo chamber that kind of continuously increases the volume of the voices within it, which is what an echo chamber does. I don't know why I described it just now. But then it just sort of builds and builds and builds and builds upon it. So you have that one side who are supposedly experts. And then you have this other side of a generation who grew up on games, who feel that they're just as qualified to talk about them. And in a lot of cases, they are. Maybe they're not quite so elegant. Maybe they don't have that journalism degree. Maybe they just can't express their ideas in such a succinct way. But they have every right to talk about the medium as much as the quote-unquote experts are. And this is different in the case of something like investigative journalism, where most of these games writers are not investigative journalists. Not everybody is Jason Schreier, who I still have a little bit of respect for, a bit.
And who got snubbed by ND and didn't get a review copy for God knows what reason. Last I heard, that was a weird one.
Well, he doesn't. Well, I don't know. He doesn't do reviews, especially not since moving to Bloomberg.
Fair.
Yeah, he's not with Kotaku anymore.
This is going more into like the role of video game media. So
but anyway, sorry.
We'll get into that at some point.
I was building into something here, but sorry, I lost track. But
so we're talking about how the investigators.
How do the people who believe that they're just as qualified to talk about these things manage to make their voice heard? Well, you can start your own blog, which will gain no traction, and this is coming from somebody on a podcast. on Twitch.
Mhm.
Not
Speaking from experience.
Yeah, we're early days. It's only 4 episodes in. We'll get there, I'm sure. But you can create your own sort of media with no outreach, or you can sort of group in together with all these other people who share your disdain, share your opinions, and together kind of create a bit of a cacophony. And so what looks more appealing to you if you feel that you're being ignored by an entire part of an industry
Yeah.
that you feel that you're a part of? And in a lot of cases you are, because if you're a consumer, you're part of the discussion. You are a little bit of a part of it.
I think even if you're, I know people tend to think of content creation coming as something as like videos or Twitch streams or making fan art, but I think at a very, very slight level, even if you're tweeting about video games, you're still making somewhat level of content that will be seen online by other people, which acts as a level of promotion. It's a very, very minimal version of it, though.
There are people on Twitter I follow and all they do is do the social media because I kind of like their takes and I enjoy reading the sort of things that they put out there. Not only is it agreeable, but I mean, it's also good to hear those other opinions as much as I follow the big games journalists to get my news feed. But then again, I also follow the People's Daily, so what do I know?
We can kind of agree somewhat that review bombing is almost like an extension of social media where you can express your discourse for a game, and not always in a way that is trolling, but it is a positive way where you can actually help the development of the game in the future or change things. But
Right.
it's I think there's other examples where it goes beyond that. So for example, I think it was last year Devotion came out, which was a horror game which featured a meme of the Chinese leader.
Yeah, it was Taiwan. It was a Taiwanese game, and it was very critical of the Chinese government.
Yes, and it was review bombed to hell by Chinese users. And we can come into this position because now we're not sure, do we call these trolls? Do we call these people that feel like the game is trolling them for their nationality and their country's leader? Because China is very patriotic. And it kind of comes in this strange area where reviews are now a level of political discourse beyond just the simple fundamentals of this game has this content, because the mocking in the game wasn't necessarily part of the gameplay or the experience. It was just a few things that were kind of scattered across, but those few things were enough to really annoy the Chinese market, who have a history of review bombing. We saw with GS5. I think the game was pulled in China initially, and people review bombed it in response. And we saw it a little bit with Battlegrounds. There's a bunch of games which have the similar thing. So now we're coming from a place of regional and cultural differences, and also a political element. So it becomes this kind of more complex issue where review bombing isn't suddenly just the trolls under the stairs trying to flick the nose of the games media or the games industry. It's a strange position.
Yeah, it is, but again, it still does fall to the same pitfalls that I mentioned before. That it's very easy to be co-opted.
Yeah,
It's very easy to sort of have the reins be taken over by people who are just there for trolling, or who are trying to use it for not quite insidious but less savory sort of takes.
Yeah,
and that's where it becomes an issue. But then the flip side is that's what sort of is hyper focused on. And that's the sort of narrative that you get overall, where
because it
you
makes
don't
a good headline.
Because it makes it an excellent headline.
And then it also encourages more interaction with that piece, because the people that are arguing for it will go in there, and the people arguing against it will go in there anyway. So it's almost like they've made this little tent, just inviting everyone in, and they're all just sweatily hugging it out and swearing at each other.
Yeah.
It's
ultimately what you have to remember is that louder voices are always amplified on the internet, and that there are more people out there with moderate takes than you might realize, or moderate opinions that you might realize. Review bombing seems to attract people from all of these walks of life, but of course it's the most vocal that will get the focus.
Yeah. I think one of the games I wanted to bring up was actually your game of the year so far, Charles. And Dust will know this, as Warcraft Reforged, which was a victim of review bombing for the correct reasons. Because Blizzard, I feel, were almost coasting on the idea of this being a success, and people would just accept it because it's Warcraft 3, right? And Warcraft 3
It's a single-player game where you can only pause 3 times against the fucking computer.
among other issues.
Among other issues, but that's the most egregious for me.
But when we come to the review bomb of this, it's almost in response to Blizzard directly, because the game didn't review too badly. But then you're left with what we mentioned before, is where the game reviewers have a platform. These big websites have a platform and influence, and the only way that you can really interact with that is either by commenting, that's the reason why all them sites have comments enabled, is because that's where you get your say. But as an extension of that is Metacritic and these review website arrogates. The same with M4G. M4G has a lot of this kind of review bombing stuff, and it's I think fundamentally we're just literally seeing review bombing as this place where people can have their say without the worry of moderation, and to a fault that can be an issue. And at the same time, it can also be a positive because you can see a diverse selection of opinions. It's just a shame that some games will attract more negative for the sake of what the game includes.
I would like to point out here are some review scores from some of the larger websites out there for Warcraft 3 Reforged. IGN gave it a 70, which, to be fair, by IGN standards, is basically don't buy this game, it's garbage. To be fair, but it's still a 70 out of 100. Yeah. PC Games gave it a 70. Whereas Game Informer gave it a 60. Destructoid gave it a 60. Twinfinite gave it a 60. This is a game that was so reviled by its community that Blizzard actually was giving no questions asked refunds a month after purchase because of just how terrible the final product was and how much it was a pivot from what was originally promised, with all the inherent issues. But according to some of these outlets, if you look at the Metacritic score, it's sitting at a 59. So it's a 60 out of 100. It's a pass.
It's above average.
They're saying it might be worth buying, there's your problem with review scores. But then if you didn't have something like a method of riling against that through review bombings, how would you, as somebody who is not aware of the game's sordid history, know what you're getting into?
We can also kind of talk about review bombing in retrospect.
It has a 0.6 out of 10, or out of 100. A 0.6 based on 30,000 review scores, user score. 0.6. It's not even a 1 out of 10.
One game that tends to get forgotten in the whole, discussion.
Sorry, I'm very passionate
topic
about that because I'm very upset about.
I know. I brought up just to troll you.
I know you did, but damn it, I'm not even a big Warcraft fan, honestly. Honestly, I'm not even that big of a Warcraft fan. I enjoy Warcraft 3, a little bit of 2. I haven't played all that much of it, but I'm not huge into Warcraft, and this just tells you how upset I am at Warcraft 3. Sitting on a goddamn gold mine, and that's what we shit out. A fucking lump of coal.
Speaking of coal...
Good afternoon, Alpaca Whacker.
Because there is a piece of coal in this game. Firewatch. So the review bombing with this wasn't anything to do with the game's quality. It's a great game. Or anything to do with DRM or anti-cheat. What the review bombers in response to was the developers themselves. As you know, it was a very small team that developed it. And after the whole PewDiePie thing, where he said a slur on stream and everyone went after him, and he had a history of stuff. They retrospectively decided to file copyright claims on his coverage of Firewatch. And in reaction to that, people review bombed them. So again, this is another side of what review bombs are, also being weaponized by people because they feel like they're not having their say, but also as a weapon that they can say, look, if you do something in retrospect, we will make your product look bad, even if the game has fundamentally not changed. Like Firewatch hasn't changed from day one of release to now, but the review bombing is there for you to see. And if you look at Steam, you'll see that big dip, and it's one of them.
Oh, sorry. Did they also complain about the ending as well? How it kind of came out of left field?
I don't think that got review bombed for the ending. I just remember there was a lot of people that expressed disappointment, which I actually thought the end. If you, in my opinion, if you don't like the ending, I feel you missed the point of the game, because the idea of the game was very grounded, and it was all about like the human relationships and sense of than some grand, oh, is it a killer? Is it aliens? Is it conspiracy? But I don't recall there was any review bombing for the ending. It was mostly to do with, if all to do with the PewDiePie thing.
Okay.
And it's a strange one because
Fair.
then that kind of brings up the question of content creators and the power they have versus the games that they're playing.
I mean, tricky. Do you go after somebody for covering a game and abuse DMCA like that? Absolutely not.
No.
Like, you can think whatever you want about PewDiePie, positive, negative, anything in between. Has the guy done things that make me scratch my head? Absolutely he has. But to abuse copyright like that just because you disagree or you are appalled by someone's behavior is not only childish, but should be fucking illegal, really, because you're circumventing the law.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, again, this is a case of how do you rally around that? How do you rally to that and make it clear that these devs have stepped over the line, or this side of this discussion has stepped over the line? It's another case of, this is how we make our voices heard, for better, for worse. A game that was
Absolutely.
review bombed for the ending, though, would be Mass Effect 3.
Mm-hmm.
Now this one, I don't know if it's justified, though. And I remember, I'll be perfectly honest, when this happened, I kind of thought this was the epitome of... Okay, now don't get me wrong. Could the ending have been much better? Yes. Did I have a problem with the original ending? Honestly, not really. Save for that final screen shilling out DLC at the end. I didn't actually have a problem with how the game ended with that kind of cinematic, because I thought it would be kind of fleshed out or explained, whatever. And so I kind of thought this was the epitome of a little bit of gaming entitlement. Because my argument was, well, yeah, the final cutscene was underwhelming, but why aren't you looking at this game as a whole as the capstone? The Mass Effect 3 in its entirety
It
is
shouldn't
the
ruin the
end of
game.
trilogy. It doesn't ruin the game because you don't exactly have closure, but I mean, you do have the series of events that you have accomplished up until this point. So that was a case of like review bombing that I thought was, a little, like, not even a little, but like pretty out of hand, really.
I can think of a good and hypothetical too. It didn't get review bombed, but it could have been for similar reasons. Is anyone familiar with LA Noire?
Yeah.
Yes.
Brilliant game. Absolutely fantastic. Can't
Really
recommend
good,
it enough.
really good.
The ending was Garbo, but
No,
it
was
didn't
it?
get review bombed. Oh, I
No, was it?
hated the
ending was
ending.
excellent. I love the ending.
No,
Yeah,
we're
the
gonna
ending was
have a talk
awesome.
about this sometime.
Oh no, we do. But I thought the ending was spectacular. It was
This comes
exactly how
from
that game
the
needed to
Mass
end.
Effect 3's ending wasn't so bad.
I
It
feel
wasn't.
like the Mass Effect
It
3
wasn't.
one
And
is,
I never finished it, so I can't really
Oh.
comment on it.
What, Mass Effect?
Unfortunately. I missed the original ending, yeah. So I'll have to get around to that.
The difference between LA Noir's ending and Mass Effect's ending was that Mass Effect was
LA
very,
Noir
very...
has closure. As
LA
much
Noir
as I
has
didn't
closure.
like it.
Yeah, you can disagree with the ending, but that doesn't make the ending bad. And this isn't me like going after you, Dust. I thought the ending was a
I
really
should have
good
clarified. I hated
story.
the ending. I should clarify that I didn't hate it because there was no closure. There certainly was closure. I'm not.
But I thought the ending suited the game perfectly fine. With Mass Effect, you're talking about an investment over 3 games, and you kind of get this like ambiguous cutscene that doesn't give you anything definitive.
Okay.
And that's what people took issue with. It's like, here's a series of events, you don't really know how they're connected, and then suddenly, like, you see this landing happen. It's like, oh, maybe everybody's alive. And then you have, oh, can you tell me more stories about the Shepherd? And then you get a scene saying Shepherd's adventures will continue in upcoming packages of DLC or whatever. So, like, that last scene really left a sour taste in it, but everything else was kind of a zigzag.
I feel like if you're reviewing Mass Effect 3, the negative reviews, because I don't think Mass Effect 3 is a bad game overall. I don't think it's as good as 2 and 1 for sure. And there's some characters I don't really gel with, which we spoke off stream before. Yeah. But I feel like the people that will negatively review Mass Effect 3 as a whole, and then for some people the entire genre, like the entire series, they're forgetting that at that point they're then reviewing the destination rather than the journey. And if the journey is really fucking good and the destination is like whatever, then I still think you've had enough quality time from the journey, so to speak.
Yeah,
to
it's like one of
justify
those reviews
positive.
that, like, oh, after about 400 hours in this game, I'm getting bored and I can't recommend it. It's like that kind of thing. It's like, really?
Oh,
Come on.
I'm seeing a bunch of goofy. I'm seeing a bunch of goofy review bombs. I forgot about this one. So, ladies and gentlemen, listen to this. At one point, Animal Crossing New Horizons was review bombed on Metacritic upon its release. Apparently, people were pissed off by the limitations of local co-op and multiplayer progression. So they just review bombed it for that.
But again, it goes to what we were saying. This is how people can express themselves beyond just social media. Because let's face it, in social media, you can get 100,000 tweets about a game, and the chances are someone in a position of influence or power will not see them tweets. But a collective group saying something similar on Metacritic will garner a view because their view kind of transcribes into a score. That score goes to the top, and this again goes into the whole problematic issue of review scores. But it will be noticed by, again, the press who report it, and then the publishers, etc., read that press article, and that just emboldens the review bomb. And that's not to say that the review bomb to begin with. In this case, it's a little bit silly, but in general, it's not to say that every review bomb is a problem or is done by people with ill intent. A lot of the time, and we've seen
Everything
this
has to be a case-by-case basis. Everything's a case-by-case basis.
Oh, look at
You
this.
can't say review bombing is bad. You can't say it's good, which I think is like the theme of this podcast, where we're looking at particular cases to highlight why some of them are good and why others are not so good or like downright terrible.
And it plays true to that idea that the most critical people are the fans of the thing they're criticizing. So fans will be critical of the thing they enjoy the most more than anyone else because they feel they know it through and through. And this is why it's always a bit troublesome when you see. I remember years ago there was an American reviewer, and I can't remember if it was a GameSpot or some other big website, and they reviewed Football Manager, and they didn't have a clue what Football Manager was. They were expecting a FIFA game. So their review was scathing. They said it was awful, it was terrible, it was boring, there was no action. Well, yeah, they came in expecting FIFA. Exactly.
You build a team, you watch the team play, that's your action.
That's your action's a spreadsheet. But it does kind of highlight that idea that, if someone who is playing a game and doesn't pick up on the problems with that game, if it's a part of an established franchise, then the review bomb, or I guess it's a little bit harsh to say review bomb in this case, but the user review will probably reflect the issues in that game that someone who is less, inversed in the franchise or genre is aware of. And, that's why I still think that user reviews, and I keep seeing people recently on Twitter saying all user reviews are pointless. I think, one, if you say that, you probably have never worked in any level of data gathering or community engagement, because that's simply ignorant of the users. Even if it's a troll, you still have to read it, okay? You still have to read it and look, because then you have to decide which one has the valuable input and which one doesn't. And
but it's not even that. You're ignoring a trend.
Yeah.
Like, you are ignoring trends if you cast that out. But it's also the same side as saying, well, critic scores are useless. Well, no, because again, you're seeing a trend. You can say they're out of touch. Yeah, they might agree with you. I might agree with you, but you still cannot ignore them. And what you're saying about like fans being the biggest critics, believe me, I am a massive fan of Star Wars and Vampire the Masquerade, and 2019 was not a fantastic year for me. Let me tell you that, as a fan. It hasn't been particularly great. Why am I super critical about the things I love? Because I love them.
Yeah.
And I'm so invested in them, and they went in directions that I'm not particularly pleased with overall. But so yeah, I'm going to be more critical. But then that also gives fuel to the other side saying, well, why should we listen to you? And then now multiply that by 1,000. And now multiply that by 100,000. That's what review bombing is. Why should we listen to you? Well, because, I have things to say about it. I'm invested in it. I mean, you won't listen to me, but you'll listen to 10,000 or 100,000 of us say the same thing. Just to build up on your point.
There's actually a few games I would like to mention. Well, two in particular. One is a very well-known case, which got highlighted by the Internet Historian, who does great videos, and usually for humorous reasons, but this one's actually a really good story. Obviously, we could go on about how Sony mismanaged an indie project, but No Man's Sky was a big victim of review bombing. But they were able to use that information to see what people wanted more first. So if like 10,000 people said I want this element fixed, and then only 500 said I want this element fixed, well, of course you go the one that most people want fixed because you want to eliminate them bad reviews. And it's a great way to be able to prioritize what the problems are with your games as a service or long arm game. And it was a similar case with the original release. I think it was Final Fantasy 14, which was so bad.
Yeah, the MMO.
Yeah, which was so bad, and everyone hated it. Reviewers and critics, users hated it, and it bombed so badly that Square Enix had to put their other games on hold to fix this game, apologize to the people that bought the game, and give them free subs for a while. Are we going to say that? Are we going to subscribe to this idea that all review bombing is negative when we have great examples of positive moves that we use through review bombing? Assassin's Creed Unity is another example. Ubisoft were very happy to make the same game over and over and over and over again, and the only thing that stopped them was people being pissed off with Unity being in such a broken state that the review bombed it to shit. People paid attention to that review bomb and didn't buy as many copies as Unity compared to other games, which then resulted in Ubisoft kind of thinking, okay, we take 2 years to make the game and we're going to change it in a new direction. And now the Assassin's Creed series is flourishing once again.
Yeah, there you go. Should we talk about the elephant in the room? I think it's time to bring that up. And
we'll get into it. I wanted to touch on No Man's Sky since it was brought up. So No Man's Sky, we were talking about how Metacritic usually doesn't change. People put the review and that's about it. So on Metacritic, we're looking at a 71 from the critics and a 4.7 user score. So 47% favorable, right? Then we look at Steam, which it didn't launch. I don't think it launched on Steam the same time as the other consoles. Maybe it did.
I think it did.
Anyway, currently on Steam, overall, you're looking at 61%. So let's compare that. 4.7 to 61, meaning about 14% or so would have changed their mind if these numbers are similar. And then recently, though, recent reviews, 85% of the 2,135 reviews in the last 30 days are positive.
Yep.
And you can't tell me that review bombing had nothing to do with that.
No, of course it didn't. That's why it's so important to, one, have those snapshots, and two, to go back and change your score. Even if not everybody does it, you can see, again, the trend. More people are saying it's positive. You see the curve going up, and that tells you right off the bat that there are improvements being made to the game. The game has pivoted. It's changed course. This is why I can't take... Honestly, it's come to the point in my life now where when I look for a review for a game, because I still don't buy games without reviewing, more often than not, in the first place I go is Steam reviews. More often than not. Either that, well, it used to be John Bain, rest in peace, but it used to be him.
Right.
Now it's Steam reviews. Or maybe occasionally whatever is reviewed on YouTube.
On monstervine.com.
I don't look for YouTube reviews. What?
On monstervine.com /
monstervine.com. But here's the thing, I don't watch YouTube reviews to be informed necessarily. Occasionally I will with a big release. I watched it for Greedfall, but most of my YouTube reviews are retro. But no, I will go to Steam reviews because they're the ones who are most in touch with the game in its current state and will be in touch with its problems and highlight them. And I read a handful of them so I can see what are commonalities between those reviews. So I know. Because I don't get that. Yep. I don't get that anymore.
Right. And it's almost like I was gonna say it's almost like politics in a sense. And don't worry, I'm not gonna go over the deep end. I'm gonna say, like, when you're interpreting polls and things like that, right? You don't just look at one instance or one poll, you look at the aggregates, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you do with these. And you take the Steam reviews, you kind of get an aggregate there, and you can watch it trend over time. You go to YouTube, you look at that too. You can even look at the, I don't really want to call them professionals, but you can look at what the critics are writing as well. And really kind of cross-reference, right?
Yeah.
They may have caught something that you missed. So it is more is better in this case, I would argue. Even if there are flaws. We'll have the big
politics episode one day. When we're ready to end the podcast and we're like, all right, we're kind of bored of this, we'll do a politics episode and then just fuck off the internet.
A review of Star Wars, like everyone else.
Yeah.
But I think to summarize our kind of general thought, at least for me for definite, but from what I understand from you guys, is we can see review bombing as not this insidious technique that's deployed by exclusively trolls. Of course, people will do that, but by people will use it as a platform who don't usually have a platform. So I'll say it again: they don't have a big Twitch following. They're not an influencer. They don't have a big Twitter following.
Yeah.
They don't make internet content. They're literally just a consumer who plays the game and will express an opinion, maybe sometimes on Twitter, on Facebook, through word of mouth. And this platform, Metacritic, and review systems like Steam, will give them a position where they can be on the same level. They can be as visible. So, of course, they will be piled into other people, but figuratively, they will be on the same level as a Kotaku or a GameSpot. Now, the important thing to remember is, of course, there are people that will troll the shit out of these systems and they will exploit them. But much like everything, we live in the age of information, and there is a level of duty and responsibility on us as, because, I write about games, you guys talk about games, Shal does videos about games. It's our responsibility to make sure that we don't get caught up in these ideas, and, we stay very true to what we think a game is worth, or how good a game is, how bad a game it is. And as readers, it's also our responsibility to actually do exactly that. Read. Don't just look at a score. Review scores are a problem because people will look through a 4 or 5 paragraph review, or even a chunkier review, and they will scan through,
scroll down,
and look for a point. And I'm telling you now, as someone who has been writing so many reviews, there is no fucking way you can quantify a 5, 10, 15, 20, 35, 50, 40 hour experience into a simple score. There is no way.
There's a reason
Exactly.
my reviews that can be like anywhere from 15 to like 40 minutes long. I do not mention any number at the end of it. I don't even say whether it's worth buying or playing, other than my own opinion. I do not score it whatsoever, other than saying this is why I think it's good, this is why I think it's bad, because that I can quantify. Back when I was writing articles, which you can still find somewhere on like archive.org if you have the URLs, we didn't use a number system. We used a similar to Steam, in between positive, negative. Okay.
Well, I think we've said everything. Dust?
There was, Shell, you did mention there was an elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to. We want it to not become the Lost of Us.
Oh,
yeah, the Lost of Us. So we should talk about really what kind of prompted this whole episode, just very briefly. Last of Us 2, because it's the latest to be review bombed. So here's the thing.
And I'll give you the latest on that. The Metascore, you're looking at 95, which we'll talk about that, but also the user score being a 3.7. And when you're looking at a scale out of a 1 through 10, I mean, that's incredibly low. That's down there with games that are outright horrible. They're bug-ridden. They're not fun to play. They don't work. They're horrible. They're tasteless. We're talking, Ride to Hell Retribution. We're talking Mind Jack. We're talking The Quiet Man. Things like that belong in that territory and below.
Yeah. But what's interesting to me about The Last of Us is just the narrative that's being spun by it. Because, and this is, now correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I've been seeing on my Twitter feed.
Okay.
The game comes out, and this is after all the leaks and all that, so you already had a huge swath of fans predisposed to not liking this game, many of which are very invested in the first one. So games reviews comes out, give it 9.5, whatever. One guy equivocates it to the emotional games are movies now, and playing The Last of Us is the equivalent of watching Schindler's List, which really struck some people the wrong way.
He said everything, most games, John Wick and The Last of Us 2 is Schindler's List. And I just a button. I have to say, this is the most ridiculous fucking thing I've ever heard. Please point to me when Schindler's List had a Nemroid, a Teddy, a Pop Funko made of it. Stop it. This
not
is
even that, but it's just the content matter for me. Like, we're still talking about a zombie game with human elements versus a biopic. About the Holocaust. A man who saved lives during the Holocaust.
It's highly disrespectful, and I could go on for ages on that, but I just think it's ridiculous.
So you have that, where you have this kind of narrative. It's a masterpiece, blah, blah, blah. Then you have fans who really like the first one, many of which felt that a sequel was completely unnecessary, are playing through the sequel and feel the story is bad. But now I want to emphasize this before I go on. I did see the trolls did come out in force, and there are many. I saw this on Alana Pierce's Twitter. She was attacked by a bunch of sweaty edgelords personally going after her, and they are part of the negative side of review bombing. So there is no 100% innocence in this. This isn't clear cut. There is elements of this, but there are plenty of people who are taking umbrage with the game and its story and are review bombing it massively. However, now it's being spun on Twitter to say people are angry because there is a girl in the game, or that there's, which people have responded with other pictures of Metacritic games with much higher scores with women as protagonists, or that there's a lesbian in the
probably
game.
one of them.
Yeah, or that Ellie's a lesbian and they don't want gays in their game, except for the fact that she was a lesbian back in 2014.
She had bisexual or lesbian tendencies in the first one. Nobody minded.
The problem with that whole argument is,
if anything, they thought it was a good thing, like that they had introduced it in a very well and tasteful manner.
So now you have, on the one side, going back to like the way I've describe this as being one side, the other side. You have the one side propping this up as like a masterpiece, must play, blah blah blah, and the other side saying, "What the hell are you talking about? The story is terrible. Where are you getting all this crap from?"
Yeah, I think obviously a lot of the troll reviews for The Last of Us 2 are from people that simply are trying to be edgelords, or they fundamentally disagree with any representation in the second game. But I find it odd because the first game had that, and I'm not just talking about the DLC, but you had Bill, who was a gay character. It isn't made abundantly clear that he's a gay character, but he is a gay character. He speaks it in such a normal way, which is a great thing about that. The first game had really good writing where it felt like these characters were actual characters and not just like, I am here because I feel this, which is a little bit of a problem that BioWare has recently. Someone will appear and just say, I represent this. And it's like, okay, but you're supposed to be a character as well. And Bill fills that perfectly. He wasn't overtly someone depicted as being a homosexual. He was just a guy who happened to be gay. And Ellie is someone like that. And I feel like the people going on about the second one saying that, how can they be so, representative in the second one? It's shoot in. It's like, well, that was in the first one as well. I have to say though, for just disclaim my reasons, I am part of the crew that thinks the first game was good. I liked the story. I thought the gameplay was a bit naff, but I'm fine with it being a one and done. I didn't think it needed a sequel. I understand why, but I think the review bombing is ridiculous.
I think some of the people saying that there's too much representation in the game are taking umbrage with how it's presented.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't played it, and I can't comment. I've only watched the leaked cutscenes and anything else that has been
I've watched quite a bit of it, and I'll say this. So my take on the game is as follows, and this is coming from someone who hasn't played the first yet. I will go back and play it. I have no interest in playing the second from what I've seen. However, and this is a huge thing, you see a lot of review bombings, lots of 0 out of 10s. People go, SJW elements, fuck this garbage, and it's ridiculous. There are some interesting elements they introduced, but not once that I feel like it was forced on me. It wasn't shoehorned in. It wasn't. The writing is god-awful, and there's certain characters that you can't like because of a bad writer, not because of the character's traits.
Yeah, this isn't the case of Dragonspear where like 2 questions in, it's revealed that she's transsexual.
Right, and
it's a strange move.
This. So the thing I'm against is, and there needs to be the differential, not for us. We all get it, but a lot of people think that a negative review is automatically a review bomb. No. The 0 out of 10s, hell yeah, those are review bombs. I will defend you to the death on that. The 10 out of 10s, I also believe are a review bomb. Yeah. This game is not a 10 out of 10. In my personal opinion, after watching several hours of the game, I would say this game falls somewhere between a 5 and 7, maybe an 8, depending on how the last couple hours or so of the game unfold. The gameplay is about what you'd expect, but it's not really innovating much on the first. That's kind of a negative. Some people didn't like that.
Games don't have to innovate to be good. I'll say that.
But
much.
I mean, 7 years later,
I know exactly what you're saying though, because this isn't an evolution of the first game in any way. It's continuing the story, but that's about it.
I'm with you. It doesn't have to.
Oh, people have disappeared.
You lost our pictures. But the graphics, I mean, make no mistake, the graphics are outstanding. They're good. The music, the atmosphere, the ambience, they all look good. The
It looks like
writing,
Shelashka's The Last of Us now. Oh wait, never
yeah,
mind.
the writing though. I mean, did the intern come up with the writing? I mean, come on. It's not good. The one-liners are bad. The overall arc, like you have so many characters that if you had just changed the order of certain events or changed their dialogue or changed something they did or made certain actions fit certain characters better,
Yeah.
it could have
And
been a
even still,
fantastic game, in my opinion. And I think
still,
that's a bummer.
there are people who also do not like that it was basically a bait and switch, because you saw the early dev builds where Joel's an
If it
old
wasn't
man.
for the leaks,
part
no
of the
one would know about Abby.
Yeah, nobody will know about Abby, and that would be a surprise. But I mean, where you saw Joel, he's aged. He's
Right.
in the game, except in the final game, he's not. They're all flashbacks.
Yeah.
And so people were very disappointed because they're not continuing Joel's story. Well,
I think obviously we've mentioned that there's going to be troll reviews for it, which is true, and some of them will express abhorrent views, and they'll use it to express what they believe who can't exist. I'm not talking about video game characters, but I'm talking about, like, obviously genders, race, etc. And obviously they are a problem, and I think we're all in agreement, and of course we should, that we shouldn't take notice of any of these. They're there just to cause trouble. So, and fundamentally, if you're interested enough to buy The Last of Us 2, then you probably don't need the reviews to begin with. You don't need to be a 10 out of 10. You don't need to hear that apparently it's a 0 out of 0. It's what fundamentally the review should be about is guiding you, not deciding for you. And I feel like review bombing and review scores in general has such a potent place in a lot of people's hearts, and I get it. Games are expensive now, and the older you get, the less time you have. We all know that. So I get that you want to do some research, but look, we live in a world where you have hundreds of professional websites, okay? And then you have all them other websites, the smaller websites, and even smaller websites after that. You have countless Twitch streamers like me and Dust. You have YouTubers like Shal. You have huge influencers. You have small influencers. You have people that are very niche and fit in certain areas. I'm still think it's a little bit sad that we live in the games industry and games culture where a review score means everything. I said this on Twitter. To me, review scores serve one purpose currently, and that is for marketing purposes. That you can slap on the box of a Game of the Year edition. Look, spend a little time. It's good to read. Read the review. This is how you find.
Reading is good.
Yeah, this is how you find reviewers that you like and respect, and you become dependable on. Don't go on Metacritic, look at one score, look at the other score, and go, oh, decision made. Because guess what? You're probably going to miss out on some really fucking great games. You really are. You're going to miss out on some great games that didn't have huge budgets.
That's the other thing, too. When you're looking at review scores, right? People think that a game has to be an 8 out of 10 in order for them to enjoy it. And that's not true. You sometimes get games like Red Dead Redemption 2 that was a near perfect game, and yet it's the same clunky gameplay as the previous game in GTA. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying the story isn't fantastic. I've only heard good things, and I do need to play it. But don't let the reviews guide you. Use it as a supplement. And I like a lot of JRPGs that fall in that 60 to 70 out of 100 range. And some people, they scoff at that. If it's lower than an 80, they're not touching it. And that doesn't mean you're not going to enjoy the game. Now, if it's a 20, you're probably not going to like it unless you hate yourself. Then you might enjoy it. Like The Quiet Man. Linko can attest to that.
Yes. That one deserved all low reviews.
Of objectively bad.
Yeah.
But I think we've comprehensively touched upon the main topic that we wanted to, unless anyone has any additional final closing comments.
Like and subscribe this if you're watching it on YouTube. Come every Sunday morning for me and Dust, Sunday afternoon for our European host over here, to get your daily fill or your weekly fill of video game chit chat about various topics in the industry.
Yep, and you need not always agree with us. We are more than allowed to have our differing
we don't
opinions.
even agree with each other. We don't even agree with each other, and I cut Dust off way too much when I'm doing this show because I just get very excited, and I'm very sorry about that.
It's okay. I'll dig through your Twitters. I'll cancel you in 10 years. Quote me on it.
He's got him.
10 years after this show with some of the opinions I've shared, I'm going to get
what's the new
canceled
social media? Twitter will be dead in 10 years.
Twitter 2.0.
But if you ever have a question for us or something on topic, or you got another game, feel free to drop it in the comments. Well, in the comments if it's YouTube, obviously, or here in the chat right now.
That
You
is
know, this
true.
is the best way to get a hold of us.
So
When
Yeah.
thank you
flashing
very
live
much for joining me, Dust and Charles, as ever. Always fun.
Always.
I hope
Great as always.
I hope we we touched the topic and people kind of thought about things in a different way when it comes to review bombing. Because
Don't forget the theme.
Oh yeah, in the corner of the internet, you know. Thank you for joining us in the corner of the internet. But
Welcome to our corner of the internet.
Our corner of the
I
internet.
believe what Linko was trying to say.
There's 3 of us and there's 4 corners. We have a spare one. That's where all you guys are. So we're all waving at each
Yeah,
other from
we
different corners.
basically have a wrestling ring. Yeah, we have a wrestling ring. We're in each of the corners.
There we go.
It's
But
going to be a strap match where we end off. First one to
what was
touch all
that
4 wins.
WCW one? It was like some old woman celebrity on a pole match.
Judy Bagwell on a pole.
Judy Bagwell on the pole match. There we go. Well,
Why do you remind me of those? Why do you remind me of those dark Vince Russo days, man?
Well, just like WCW, this podcast is also coming to an end. So thank you for joining us.
I thought you were going to say just like WCW, this podcast is going to feature Vince Russo. I was going to say, why? We've got a good thing going.
What one day? Well, that was our view on review bombing. I hope people had plenty to chomp on, you know. But I think the last message is, you know, as we mentioned it, don't take reviews as the be all and end all. I think it's healthy for you to read a review, the actual text, not the score. Watch some videos, you know, have a wide source and just make a decision based on what you saw and if you like the looks of a game. It doesn't matter if it's AAA, it doesn't matter if it's indie or something on itch that's like made by one guy in the space for a week. It all matters, and you know, at the end of the day, it's you're getting experience out of the game, and even if it's something that's not wholly positive, I'm sure you'll still find something you can talk about. The worst games are the most boring games, or the quiet man.
You should watch some games YouTubers who make overly long analytic videos about games where they just kind of pretty much write long essays of critical insight.
Exactly.
That aren't as popular as Joseph Anderson.
Just like Charles. But
that'll take you to his YouTube.
I shall bid farewell and let us wave.
I shall also bid farewell.
Goodbye, everyone.
2 out of 10. 2 out of 10. I'm review bombing this shit.
Oh God.
Yeah.